Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Ahead workshop brought to you by the Graduate Statistics Studio here at Fresno State. Today we will talk about the importance of planning out a data set before collecting data. The reason we want to plan out a data set before collecting data is because that it allows us for minimal work down the road and it gives us a clear idea of what the goal is. And we have the possibility of finding potential mistakes early on. Today we'll be making a grade book, but the techniques that we learn in this workshop can be used for virtually any data set. First, we'll need to think about what information will be covered in our grade book. We want to include all assignments that each student will take, but first we need to include some students. So here we'll put student last name, maybe first name, just to start. And I'll go ahead and fill these in off screen. Okay, so I've gone ahead and filled in the names off screen. I've just used student 1, student 2, because I'm not very good at making up names myself. Now what we need to do is think about how we want the appearance of our gradebook to be. We don't want a bunch of columns with scores of different assignments that each student completes, because we could end up way down here, you know. And we want it to be very quick and simple whenever we open this up. We want to be able to see what a student's grade is immediately. So in order to do that, we'll need to separate each category of assignments into separate sheets. So here we'll create sheet 2. We'll call this one overall. And then we'll start this one with, maybe this one will be exams. So we'll need to fill in last name, first name. However, there is a faster way. And as a general rule when working with Excel, and the reason we're making this gradebook ahead of time is so that we can allow ourselves minimal work in the future. Having to constantly repeat our processes by typing names in over and over isn't very helpful. So instead, what we can do is delete this one, and we can copy this one. We can right click it, click on move or copy, click on create a copy, move to the end, and now we have overall 2. They are identical to each other. That way we don't have to type in all of those names again. Another way we can do that is if we click and hold the page, the sheet, and you see how it's hovering over, there's that little page icon. If you hold the control button down, a little plus sign appears on that icon. So I'm not holding the control button down. Now I'm holding the control button down. And when the plus shows up there, that means that you are creating a copy. So if I move it to one of the arrows, we'll put it at the very end, what it's going to do is create overall number 3. When I let go, overall number 3 is there. And again, they are identical to each other. What I can do now is change this one to exams, and I can change this one to quizzes. Perhaps there's even an extra credit section. Extra credit. And I ended up not copying it over. So right away I did something wrong. If you happen to do that, it's not the end of the world. You can copy this over and paste it. How I did that was, if we just undo that real quick, I clicked in between A1, this area right here, it selects the entirety of this sheet. Then I copied it. I hit Control C. You can also right click to copy. The dotted lines indicate that it is being copied. Then I went over to extra credit, clicked on the first cell, A1, and then I hit Control V to paste it. And you can also paste up here or by right clicking. Here are your paste options. Next up, I'll need to include a total score column. And I want this total score column to be in every single sheet. I could type it in every single sheet, but that won't be very helpful because, as I've mentioned before, you only want to do something once if you can get away with it. We don't want to do it multiple times. How we'll end up doing that is if I hold down the control, or if I hold down not control, the shift key, and then I click on overall, and you see how now they're all highlighted? What that is telling me is that if I type something in one, it's going to be typing in all of them. And because right now all of them are the exact same, it's going to end up being the exact same in all of them. If we click on cell C1, type total score, and press enter. If we click on quizzes, we'll see total score exists there. Exams, it's there. Overall, it's still there. I hope this really showcases why it's important to make a tabular data set. You can see that because last name and first name were the exact same in every single sheet, when we added total score to C1, it added total score to every single C1. If we had had other data right here under C1, maybe we had a middle name on this particular quiz section, what would end up happening is that it would overwrite that middle name and put total score there instead. And we don't want that. So we want to keep everything as consistent as possible. Now I want to create exams. So we'll have exam 1, exam 2, and exam 3. If I type in total score, I want equals SUM for sum, and I want the sum of the 3 exams that they take. So I've just highlighted D2 to F2. You could also type it in D2 colon F2. Close the parentheses and then press enter. We want that carried all the way down. So here we have it. We want the same thing for quizzes. Maybe there are 3 quizzes as well. Let's do 4 quizzes actually. We'll type equals and then again SUM for sum. And then I press the tab key to select it. So SUM, and there's a list here. If you want to click off of this list, you have to double click. It only works once you see the open parentheses. You don't have to double click, you can just type open parentheses as well. Highlight this section, quiz 1 through 4, press enter. We'll drag them all down. And if we click on one just to test to make sure that it's actually grabbing the cells we want, we'll see we're under C8, and we want this one to grab the scores from here. So here we see D8, that's D8 to G8. It's highlighting this section right here, which is exactly what we want it to do. And extra credit, let's just have a total score for extra credit. Under overall, what we want to do is something a little different. We have our total score, but we also have exam total. We'll have quiz total, extra credit total. We highlight these, double click in between. It just adjusted the cell width so that it fits all of the information within it. What we want to do now is if we press the equals key, so under total, oh, my mistake, under exam total, we'll press the equals key, and we'll go under exams. And you see how this is changing up here? This is equals exams exclamation mark. That's telling us it's looking at the exams sheet. And then we want to click on the total score and press enter. So now it's referencing that as a 0. If we click on it, it says equals exams C2. So for student 1, their total exam score right now is a 0. If we go in and we adjust it, let's say on the first exam they got 50 points. See how it automatically updated? That's exactly what we want to do. We want to make as minimal amounts of work as possible later on down the road. Maybe on the second exam they got not 785, they got 75. And on the last exam, they were doing all not so good. They did 63 points. So their total exam score for the entire semester was 188 points. If we look back at overall, what we should see is that student 1 has 188 points. It's exactly what we see. It updates everything automatically. If we delete these, student 1 now has a 0, and the overall is a 0 again. We want the same thing to happen for quiz total. If we type equals, what the equals is telling Excel is I'm going to enter a function or formula. In this case, we're entering a formula. We're going over to quizzes. So I want, this is what we're telling Excel. I want you to reference under the sheet quizzes, cell C2. When we press enter, there it is again. So we want C2 for all of student 1 because student 1 is row 2. We want this one to be the exact same thing. Equals extra credit, total score, C2. Ends up with a 0. Here, what we're going to do is very similar to what we did on each of the other sheets, equals sum, and then highlight each of these, D2 to F2, press enter, and there. It's a 0 because 3 zeros, when you add them all up, still ends up equaling a 0. Let's go ahead and mess with this a little bit. We have 10. So student 1's total score is 10 points. If we go over to quizzes, let's say quiz 2, they got a 5. If we go back to overall, what we should see is 5 plus 10 is 15. It's exactly what we see. Let's go ahead and change these real quick. Just return them to 0. Now we could type those out, each of these formulas over and over, but we don't want to do that. So we'll highlight them, and we did them all first, so that way we can just carry them down once. Again, we want to check, it's just a good habit to check to make sure that everything is working properly. We select one of these at random, student 11, this is number 12. We want all of the numbers to be 12. It's counting 12. If we click on it, it'll even show us where it's highlighting, or where it's getting its information by highlighting that section. If we click on one of these, we also want it to be 12. Exams, C12. Quizzes, C12. Extra credit, C12. This is the information that we want. Our gradebook is almost complete. We have total score, but we don't have percentage or the grade, the letter grade that each student received. Let's go ahead and create a new sheet, move the sheet all the way down to the end, and call this sheet Constants. The constants sheet is where we are going to have every single assignment and how much that assignment is worth, as well as the total amount of points that a category of assignments are worth. We'll call this one name, and we'll call this one point value. If we go back, we'll remember that we have 3 exams, 4 quizzes, and 1 column for extra credit. We'll go back to the constants. We have exam 1, exam 2, exam 3. We have quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, and quiz 4. The point value for each one. This first one is 100, the second one is 100, 100. Let's say quiz 1 was worth 10, quiz 2 was a little bit more, was worth 15. Then we have 20, and quiz 4 was worth 50 points. If we go down a couple steps, I like to include some space between. We have total score. Remember, if you can think of what we did before, we have a total score, we want to have the total of this. So take a moment to think about what function we're going to be using here. If you guess sum, that's correct. We'll highlight each of these values, and we end up with a sum of 395 points. Just make this a little bigger, make this one a little bit bigger. We have 395 total points that a student can earn in this class. We then need to name each one of these. Or we don't really need to name each one, but it's a good idea just in case. Call this one exam 1, press enter. Exam 2, press enter. We're going to go ahead and fill in the other ones off screen. Okay, total score, I called total score. Quiz 4, I called 4, and so on. You can see each of them has a name now. If I type equals, let's say, exam, as I start typing out exam, it shows up over here. If I double click exam 2, it highlights that section. If I press enter, it says 100. Now, if I change this one over here to 90, that one changes as well. If I delete it, what we're going to do next is very important to have the cell references named. If we type under percentage, I've created this percentage column. We'll type equals, and we want the total score divided by total score. So you're probably wondering, I can just type, 395 in here. I don't need to change any of that. I don't need this total score, and I can just do 395. But what happens if you change the amount of total points available to each student? If you're teaching the same class next semester and you decide, actually, I want quiz 3 to be worth 25 points. If you update it here, it updates here, and it updates here. If you type in 395, when you update it over here, well, now you have to update it over here, and then you have to update it anywhere else that you've put it. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we do something once and it happens multiple times. So that is the crucial key point to this entire workshop, is doing something once or twice so that it happens all the time. We want to select the percentage for everyone. And let's go ahead and mess with this student 1. They got 100, they got 90, and they got 75 on their last exam. They started off really strong, but as the semester got on, they started to realize they could get away with doing less. If we look at their overall, we see they had 265 total points, and here's their percentage. We can turn it into a percentage here, but I like doing it this way. So we put those in parentheses, and then we multiply it by 100. I like doing it this way because it gives me the decimal. Sometimes I'll increase someone's grade based on their, if they're close enough to the next point as opposed to just having a decimal value. Now that there's the percentage, I want to calculate the letter grade based off of the percentage. I could go through and look at each one and decide, okay, this is a D, this is an F. Instead, I'm going to do it a different way with the constant sheet. I'm going to create a table in here. I'm going to have score and letter grade. And how I want to do this is I want this to update based on what the total score is. So we have F, C, or sorry, D, C, B, and A. I could calculate how much it is, outside of Excel with a calculator, but it's better to do something once so that any one change you make changes everything. We know that we need to start with what the lowest possible value is for an F. We know no student will get negative points. I've never seen it, fortunately. So 0 is the lowest possible score that someone could get in this class. What is the lowest possible score that someone could get to have a D, which means they'd have one higher than the highest possible score for an F? Well, we can do that by typing equals. We select total score, and then we multiply total score by 0.6. So 240 is the lowest possible score that someone can get in order to have a D. And we'll do the same thing here. So type total score, we see it there, times 0.7. And we just repeat this process multiple times. 0.8 total score times 0.9. So here's the breakdown of scores. Now we know that we can reference a single cell by giving it a name. We can also reference a selection of cells. We'll call this grade table. So if I click on any one of these, we'll notice that it doesn't say grade table. But if we highlight the entire section, now it's called grade table. If we go over to overall, we have letter grade here, and we want the letter grade to be based off of their total score. So if I type equals VLOOKUP, which stands for VLOOKUP, we select that one, and then we click on this one, because we look here, it says lookup value, so we want to look up 265, we press comma. Now we're looking at table array. That one's the highlighted one. We want table array to be grade table. That's why we gave it a name. And the column index number, that's asking which column are we referencing. Well, we put our scores on the left, so our grades will be on the right, which is the second column. So we'll put a 2. We'll close this up and press enter. Before we press enter, if we look at 265, we'll go back over to constants. We'll see the lowest possible score, or for D, is 240, but for a C, it's 280. So a score of 245 will end up being a D, or 265, which is exactly what we see here. This one should show up as an F, or all of these students should show up as an F once we drag it down, which is exactly what we see. Let's go ahead and manipulate this a bit. Let's create some random numbers, rand between 0 and 100. And we highlight all of these and drag them all down. If we go back over to overall, we see that one person has a D. If we go over here, we'll type rand between again, 0 to, let's say, 10. Drag it over and drag it down. If we look at overall, now we're starting to see a mixture. And let's include some extra credit points. Rand between, let's say 0 to 100. If we go back over to overall, now we start to see some C's in there. Finally, what we need to do is create one more sheet. And this sheet's very important. It's called the data dictionary. And the reason we're going to create a data dictionary, well, there's a few reasons we're going to create one. One of the biggest reasons is in case we forget what values we use or variables that we have. The other important reason is that if someone other than us comes to look at this, the data dictionary is here so that they can understand what our thought process was. So we'll name this new sheet data dictionary. And this is where we'll highlight this, all of our variable names, go back to data dictionary, and then this time I'm going to paste a very special one. I'm going to select this one, which is called transpose. Instead of pasting across, like how it was selected originally, transpose takes columns and turns them into rows, and rows into columns. So here we have it. These are each of our variables. I'm going to insert one at the top and call it variable name, and then description right next to it. I'll even include values. make this a little bit bigger. We have last name, student's last name, student's first name, then student's total score, exam total. Well, this is the student's total exam score. And values over here are useful if I've coded anything or I want specific notes. You could change it to whatever you want. Notes, values, something else. And here I will just put, percentage, students, percentage based on total score. I'll put in maybe the formula. Instead of putting the equals first, I need to put the apostrophe first. So apostrophe equals students total score divided by total underscore score. Then letter grade, I can even include information based on the VLOOKUP that we used. So when we look back over here, we have every single variable identified. We could go even further to include what each exam is, what each quiz is, but we gave them pretty sufficiently descriptive names so that if someone came in here, I think they could figure out what quiz 2 meant. But if you give very different names, EC total, it might not be readily apparent to everyone what EC total is. If they click on it, they can find, okay, it's grabbing from extra credit. But having EC total here, students total extra credit score, means that when someone looks in here, they don't have to do any digging to find out what EC total means. They just go to the data dictionary and they find out immediately, oh, EC total is the total extra credit score for the student. This concludes the Thinking Ahead workshop. Thank you.